They built an algorithm to measure your worth, fed it every data point, your clicks, your purchases, your patterns, your predictable little loops. It ran the numbers, crunched the possibilities, mapped your entire existence into neat little categories. And then something happened they didn't program for. The system froze. Error messages cascaded. Because you can't calculate what refuses to be contained. You know what's fascinating about systems? They're designed to predict you. Every platform, every feed, every carefully curated experience. It's all betting on your next move. They've mapped the average. They've studied the predictable. They've monetized the comfortable. And somewhere along the way, you started wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe you are just another data point, another number in their endless calculations. But here's where their models break down. Sit with this for a moment. Right now, in this exact second, you're carrying something that no algorithm can quantify. It's that restless feeling in your chest when you scroll past another highlight reel. That tension in your jaw when you compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. That quiet voice that whispers at 3 in the morning, "Is this really it? Is this the ceiling?" They can't measure that hunger. They can predict consumption, but they can't calculate creation. They can forecast your patterns, but they can't foresee you pivot. Think about the last time you felt truly alive. Not entertained, not distracted. Alive. When was it? Was it when you followed the script perfectly? When you stayed inside the lines they drew for you? Or was it that moment when you did something that made absolutely zero sense to anyone watching, but every cell in your body knew it was right? The algorithm doesn't have a category for that. Here's what nobody tells you about breaking patterns. It's not dramatic. There's no soundtrack, no slow motion moment where everything clicks. It's usually quiet. It's usually Tuesday. You're standing in the same place you've stood 1,000 times, and something just shifts. The voice that's been whispering gets a little louder. The excuse that's always worked suddenly sounds hollow. The fear that's kept you frozen starts looking less like protection and more like a cage you built with your own hands. And that's when the real discomfort begins. Because staying small, that's comfortable. Predictable is safe. The algorithm loves predictable. It can sell to predictable. It can control predictable. But the moment you start questioning the script, the one they wrote, the one you memorized, the one you've been performing for an audience that doesn't even remember your name, that's when you become unmeasurable. Let's get specific about what's been holding you back. It's not lack of opportunity. The internet has democratized access to everything. It's not lack of information. You could learn quantum physics from your phone while sitting on a train. What's actually stopping you is something far more insidious. It's the story you keep telling yourself about who you are. You've narrated yourself into a corner. I'm the type of person who, and then you fill in the blank with every limitation you've ever accepted as truth. I'm not good with money. I'm not creative. I'm not the kind of person who takes risks. I'm not built for that level of intensity. And every time you repeat these lines, you're running the same program, following the same script, confirming the algorithm's prediction. But what if that story was just wrong? Not wrong because you lied. Wrong because you wrote it when you didn't know what you were capable of. You wrote it based on old data, outdated beliefs, someone else's definition of possible. And now you're living inside a narrative that's 3 versions behind who you're actually becoming. Here's the part that'll make you uncomfortable. You're already different than you were when you started reading this. Your brain has been forming new connections. Your perspective has been shifting. The person who began this journey is not the same person processing these words right now. Change isn't something that happens later. It's happening in real time, always. The only question is whether you're directing it or letting it happen to you. The algorithm assumes you'll stay the same. It's betting on your consistency. Every recommendation, every suggestion, every people like you also enjoyed is based on the assumption that tomorrow's you will want exactly what yesterday's you wanted. But you're not a static entity. You're not a fixed point. You're a living process, a constant state of becoming. And the moment you recognize that, really internalize it, the whole game changes. Think about water for a second. Seems weak, right? Soft, yielding. You can push it aside with your hand, but give that same water enough time, enough persistence, enough unwavering commitment to its nature, and it carves canyons through solid rock. It doesn't fight the stone. It doesn't try to be something. It's not. It just keeps moving, keeps flowing, keeps showing up with relentless consistency. That's not your limitation. That's your blueprint. You don't need to become harder, louder, more aggressive. You need to become more fluid, more persistent, more committed to your own momentum. The world is full of people trying to be diamonds. Hard, perfect, unchanging. But diamonds are static. Water transforms entire landscapes. So what would happen if you stopped trying to prove yourself and started trusting your process? This is where it gets real. You've been performing for an invisible audience, crafting every move, every choice, every expression of yourself based on how you think it'll be received. Will they like this version of me? Will this get approval? Will this fit their expectations? And somewhere in all that calculation, you lost track of the most important variable. What do you actually want? Not what sounds good to say at dinner parties, not what looks impressive on paper, not what your parents would be proud of or what your old classmates would envy. What do you want when nobody's watching? When there's no algorithm tracking your choice? When there's no feed to update, no image to maintain, no narrative to protect? That answer, the real one, the one you're afraid to say out loud, that's where your power lives. But accessing it means letting go of something. The comfort of being understood, the safety of being predictable, the ease of fitting into categories that already exist. You have to be willing to confuse people, to disappoint some expectations, to outgrow the boxes they've put you in, including the ones you put yourself in. And that's terrifying, because being misunderstood feels like rejection. Being unexpected feels like failure. Being incomprehensible to the algorithm feels like being invisible. Except it's the opposite. When you become unmeasurable, you become magnetic. When you stop fitting patterns, you start creating them. When you refuse to be predicted, you become the disruption everyone else is trying to engineer. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a room full of people all reading from the same script. They've memorized their lines. They know their cues. They perform their roles flawlessly. The algorithm can predict every word, every gesture, every reaction. It's seamless, efficient, completely forgettable. Now imagine someone walks in who's never seen the script. They don't know the rules. They respond authentically. They ask questions nobody programmed. They create moments that weren't in the schedule. At first, it's chaos. The system doesn't know what to do with them. The other performers are thrown off. Everything feels wrong. But then, something shifts. People start paying attention, not because this person is louder or flashier, because they're real, unpredictable, alive in a way that scripted performances can never be. That's you on the other side of fear. Right now, you're standing at a threshold. Behind you is every version of yourself you've ever been, every mistake you've learned from, every pattern you've outgrown, every story you've told about your limitations. It's familiar territory, comfortable, known. Ahead of you is territory you haven't mapped yet, possibilities you haven't proven, versions of yourself you've only imagined in those rare moments when you let yourself dream without editing. It's uncertain, uncomfortable, unknowable, and the algorithm is screaming at you to turn around, to go back to what's worked before, to stay where you're measurable, predictable, controllable. It's pulling every lever it has, showing you everyone else's highlight reel, reminding you of every time you've tried and stumbled, whispering that safety is smart and risk is reckless. But here's what the algorithm can't account for. That whisper in your chest isn't going away. That restlessness isn't a bug. It's a feature. It's your internal navigation system telling you there's more. Not more stuff, not more status, more of you. Parts of yourself you haven't met yet, capacities you haven't tested, expressions of your potential that don't exist until you create them. You can ignore it. Millions do. They turn up the volume on distraction. They double down on the familiar. They spend their entire lives wondering, what if, while telling themselves that practical is the same as fulfilled? Or you can listen. Listening doesn't mean you have to blow up your entire life tomorrow. It doesn't require some grand dramatic gesture. It starts smaller than that. It starts with questioning one assumption you've been treating as fact, testing one boundary you've been respecting as law, taking one action that doesn't fit the pattern. What happens when you apply for that thing you're not quite qualified for? When you start that project before you feel ready? When you share that idea before it's perfect? When you show up as yourself before you've calculated how it'll be received? The algorithm predicts you won't. Statistics say most people choose comfort. History suggests you'll follow the path of least resistance. But you're reading this, which means some part of you has already decided that comfortable isn't enough anymore. Some part of you is done optimizing for other people's metrics. Some part of you is ready to become unmeasurable. So let's talk about what that actually looks like. It looks like making decisions that don't make sense to anyone but you. It looks like investing time in things that have no guaranteed return. It looks like being willing to look foolish in pursuit of something that matters more than looking smart. It looks like choosing growth over comfort so many times that discomfort becomes your new baseline. And here's the beautiful part. The terrifying, beautiful part. Once you start, you can't unsee it. Once you taste what it feels like to act from authentic desire, rather than calculated strategy, going back feels like suffocating. Once you experience the energy that comes from aligned action, forcing yourself into misaligned patterns becomes physically painful. You reprogram yourself, not through willpower or discipline or grinding through resistance, through recognition, through remembering what being alive actually feels like, through reconnecting with the part of you that existed before you learned to perform. Think about who you were before you knew you were being watched, before you learned to edit, before you discovered that approval was currency. There was a version of you that created for the joy of creating. That asked questions because you were curious, not because it would make you look smart. That took risks because the possibility was more interesting than the safety. That version of you isn't gone. It's buried under layers of learned behavior, smothered by years of playing it safe, quieted by 1,000 small compromises. But it's still there, still restless, still hungry, still waiting for you to remember. And the moment you do, the moment you reconnect with that original frequency, everything changes. Not because the world suddenly becomes easier, because you become more aligned. Your actions start flowing from authenticity instead of calculation. Your choices start reflecting your values instead of your fears. Your presence starts emanating the kind of energy that can't be manufactured or faked. That's what the algorithm can't measure. That's what breaks the prediction model. That's what makes you unmappable. Because authentic expression isn't consistent. It evolves, it responds, it adapts, it surprises even you. There's no pattern to capture because you're not repeating, you're creating in real time. Based on what's true for you right now, not what worked for you last year. So what's true for you right now? What do you know that you're pretending not to know? What change have you been postponing? What version of yourself have you been avoiding because it requires you to disappoint someone's expectations? These aren't rhetorical questions. Your brain is answering them right now whether you want it to or not. And whatever just surfaced, that uncomfortable truth you immediately tried to rationalize away, that's your compass, not your comfort, not your convenience, not your carefully constructed justifications. Your discomfort is pointing you toward your next evolution. And here's where most people stop. They see the direction, they feel the pull, they recognize the truth, and then they negotiate with it. They bargain. They tell themselves stories about timing, about preparation, about waiting for the right moment, the right resources, the right alignment of circumstances. But there is no right moment. There's only this moment, and what you choose to do with it. You can spend the next year preparing to be ready, researching, planning, gathering information, waiting for certainty. And a year from now, you'll be exactly where you are now, just 1 year older and 1 year more practiced at avoiding your own potential. Or you can take one action today that scares you. One small step toward the version of yourself you keep glimpsing in those quiet moments. One choice that prioritizes becoming over belonging. One move that values transformation over approval. It doesn't have to be perfect. It probably won't be. It just has to be real. Because here's the thing about algorithms and systems and all the machinery designed to keep you predictable. They only work if you participate. They only have power if you believe their predictions matter more than your possibilities. They only control you if you value their approval more than your own evolution. The moment you opt out, not dramatically, not defiantly, just quietly and completely, their entire model collapses. Error messages cascade, because they built their predictions on a version of you that just stopped existing. And in that space, in that beautiful, terrifying space between who you were and who you're becoming, magic happens. Not the kind of magic that looks good on social media. The kind that rewires your entire relationship with yourself. The kind that shifts your baseline of what's possible. The kind that makes you wonder how you ever settled for anything less than this level of aliveness. That's not waiting for you in the future. That's available right now, in this moment, in the choice you're about to make, in the truth you're about to honor, in the action you've been postponing. The algorithm is still running, still calculating, still trying to predict your next move based on your last 1,000 moves. But you're not bound by history. You're not defined by patterns. You're not limited by their measurements. You're the variable that breaks the equation, the data point that refuses to fit, the possibility they never programmed for. Let's go deeper into what's actually happening in your neural pathways right now. Because this isn't just philosophy, it's neuroscience wrapped in poetry. Every time you make a choice that contradicts your established pattern, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're creating new neural pathways. You're teaching your nervous system that the old story isn't the only story. Your brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly running simulations based on past data, trying to keep you safe by keeping you the same. It just knows that new equals threat. So when you feel that resistance, that voice telling you to wait, to reconsider, to play it safe one more time, that's not wisdom. That's just your prediction machine, trying to keep you in the same loop. It's running old code, operating from outdated programming, protecting a version of you that doesn't serve who you're becoming. And breaking that loop requires more than motivation. It requires understanding how the machinery works. Your identity isn't who you are. It's who you've practiced being. Every time you say, I'm not the type of person who, you're reinforcing neural pathways. You're making it easier for your brain to run that same program tomorrow. You're literally sculpting yourself into the shape of your limitations. But here's the thing about neuroplasticity. It works both ways. Every time you act in contradiction to your story, you're weakening those old pathways. You're making them less automatic, less believable. Every time you do the thing you've told yourself you can't do, you're providing your brain with new evidence, new data, new possibilities to predict from. This is how transformation actually works. Not through inspiration, not through affirmations, through action that contradicts your established identity, through choices that don't make sense to the version of you that existed yesterday. Think about the last time you surprised yourself. Not the last time you did something impressive. The last time you genuinely shocked yourself with your own capability. What was it? How did it feel? And more importantly, what did you do with that information? Most people experience moments like that and then immediately minimize them. Explain them away, call them flukes or exceptions, because accepting them as evidence would mean having to update their entire self-concept. And that's uncomfortable. It's easier to stay consistent with your story than to admit the story might be fiction. But what if you stopped fighting that evidence? What if you started collecting it instead? Building a case against your own limitations? Gathering proof that you're more capable, more resilient, more adaptable than the character you've been playing? That's not arrogance. That's awakening. That's what happens when you stop defending your boundaries and start testing them instead. And yes, you're going to fail. You're going to stumble. You're going to have moments where the old pattern feels safer and you'll want to retreat back into the familiar. That's not regression. That's part of the process. Every surfer falls. Every artist produces garbage. Every person who ever transformed went through a messy middle where they weren't who they were anymore, but hadn't fully become who they're meant to be. That in-between space, that's where most people quit, because it's uncomfortable. You're too evolved to go back, but not evolved enough to feel natural in the new pattern. You don't fit anywhere. The old crowd doesn't recognize you. The new crowd hasn't found you yet. You're in transition, in metamorphosis, in the messy, beautiful, terrifying space between caterpillar and butterfly. And everything in you wants to crawl back into the cocoon you just broke out of. But you can't, even if you tried. Because once you've seen what's possible, once you've tasted what aligned action feels like, once you've experienced what happens when you prioritize truth over comfort, you can't unknow it. You can pretend, you can delay, you can distract yourself into temporary amnesia. But that knowing doesn't go away. It sits in your chest like a stone. gets heavier every time you ignore it, makes itself known in the quiet moments, whispers louder when you're trying to sleep, refuses to let you forget that you chose safety over authenticity one more time. And eventually, the discomfort of staying the same becomes greater than the discomfort of changing. Eventually, the pain of remaining stuck exceeds the fear of stepping forward. Eventually, you reach a point where evolution isn't a choice. It's the only option that doesn't feel like slow death. That's not rock bottom, that's the launching pad. Because transformation doesn't happen when everything's comfortable. It happens when staying the same becomes unbearable. When the gap between who you are and who you're capable of becoming feels like betrayal. When you can't look at yourself in the mirror without seeing all the potential you're suffocating. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this. Don't answer immediately. Don't intellectualize it. Feel it. What would your life look like if you stopped negotiating with your potential? If you stopped making compromises with mediocrity? If you stopped treating your dreams like hobbies and your fears like facts? What would change if you gave yourself permission to want what you actually want? To pursue what actually calls to you? To become who you actually are underneath all the layers of performance and protection? I'm not talking about what's realistic. I'm not asking about what's probable. I'm asking about what's true. What lights you up? What makes time disappear? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail and nobody was keeping score? That answer? The one that just appeared in your mind before your rational brain could censor it. That's your signal. That's your compass. That's the direction your soul is trying to point you toward, while your survival instinct is trying to keep you in place. And here's what nobody tells you about following that signal. It doesn't get easier. You don't reach some magical plateau where everything flows effortlessly and obstacles disappear. What changes is your relationship with difficulty. What shifts is your tolerance for discomfort. What evolves is your capacity to keep moving even when everything in you wants to stop. You become someone who does hard things. Not because you're special. Not because you're more disciplined or more talented or more naturally gifted. Because you've practiced choosing growth over comfort enough times that it becomes your default setting. Your nervous system learns that discomfort isn't danger. Your brain learns that fear is data, not a stop sign. Your entire being learns that you're capable of more than you previously believed. And that's when the real magic happens. Not when life gets easier. When you get stronger. When your capacity expands. When your baseline of what's possible shifts so dramatically that your old ceiling becomes your new floor. Think about how strong you've already become, just by surviving everything that's tried to break you. Every loss you've processed, every failure you've recovered from, every heartbreak you've healed through, every version of yourself you've had to grieve in order to become the next version. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. You're not even the same person you were last month. You've been evolving this entire time. The only question is whether you're evolving intentionally or accidentally, whether you're directing your transformation or just letting life happen to you. And yes, life will keep happening. Circumstances you didn't plan for, challenges you didn't prepare for, plot twists that rewrite your entire story. That's not going to stop. The chaos isn't going away. The uncertainty isn't going to resolve. But you can change how you meet it. You can shift from victim to creator, from passenger to pilot, from someone who's shaped by their circumstances to someone who shapes their circumstances through how they respond. That's the real power. Not controlling what happens, controlling who you become in response to what happens. And that starts with one choice. One moment where you decide that who you're becoming matters more than who you've been. One action that prioritizes your evolution over your comfort. One move that values truth over approval. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be honest, real. Aligned with who you're actually trying to become instead of who you've been pretending to be. Maybe it's having the conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's starting the project you've been postponing. Maybe it's admitting the truth you've been hiding. Maybe it's asking for what you actually want instead of settling for what's being offered. Maybe it's walking away from what's familiar because you've outgrown it, even though leaving feels like betrayal. Whatever it is, you know what it is. That thing that just flashed through your mind, that situation that made your stomach tighten, that truth that made you want to scroll past this part, that's not anxiety. That's recognition, your deeper knowing trying to get your attention. And you can keep ignoring it. You can keep finding reasons why now isn't the right time, why you need to prepare more, plan more, wait for better conditions. You can keep optimizing for everyone else's comfort while your own soul withers from neglect. Or you can honor it. Not perfectly, not with full clarity, not with absolute certainty about how it'll turn out, just with enough courage to take the next step, enough trust to follow the pull, enough faith in yourself to bet on your becoming. Because here's what I know about you, even though we've never met. You wouldn't still be here if you were satisfied with surface-level existence. You wouldn't still be reading if you were content with comfortable. You wouldn't still be processing these words if some part of you wasn't hungry for more. And that hunger, that restlessness, that feeling that you're meant for something beyond what you're currently experiencing, that's not dissatisfaction. That's not ingratitude. That's your potential calling you forward. That's your future self reaching back through time, trying to remind you who you're capable of becoming. The algorithm can't measure that. The system can't quantify it. The prediction models can't account for it. Because you're not data. You're not a statistic. You're not a predictable pattern running the same loop. You're a living, breathing, constantly evolving expression of possibility. And the moment you truly internalize that, the moment you stop trying to fit into their categories and start creating your own, everything changes. Not because the world suddenly validates you, because you stop needing the world to validate you. Not because obstacles disappear, because you stop seeing obstacles as barriers and start seeing them as the resistance that makes you stronger. Not because life gets easier, because you get more capable, more resilient, more aligned with who you actually are. And that version of you, the one that's been waiting for you to remember, the one that's been whispering through your resistance and speaking through your restlessness, that version isn't coming someday. That version is available right now, in this moment, in the choice you're about to make. So what are you going to do with that? Are you going to keep running the old program? Keep confirming the algorithm's predictions? Keep playing the character you've already mastered? Or are you ready to break the pattern? To become unmeasurable? To stop performing for invisible audiences and start living for the only audience that actually matters? The person you see in the mirror? The one who knows your truth? The one who feels your hunger? The one who's been waiting for you to finally choose yourself. You were never meant to be measured. You were meant to be immeasurable. Now here's your move. Comment. One word that describes the version of yourself you're done pretending doesn't exist. No explanation, no context, just the truth. Let's see who's ready to break their own algorithm.